the newly elected Conservative mayor for Cambridgeshire and Peterborough, a former colleague of mine, and that is now, and I'm sure I'm about to say Mr., but he's now Mayor Paul Bristow. Paul, how are you?
I'm okay, Jonathan, and you can still call me Paul. You don't have to call me Mayor Bristow or anything, mate.
Well, the reason I want to call you Mayor Bristow, Paul, is because I've just become the Mayor of Kidsgrove Town Council and therefore Kidsgrove Parish. I think this is mayor-to-mayor conversation happening here, albeit obviously yours is on a much grander and bigger stage, but I've managed to get myself some civic bling. Out of interest, do you get any gold chains as part of your role?
I get no gold chains, but after you mentioning Kidsgrove and Talk in Parliament on almost every occasion, I think more people know where that is than they perhaps do somewhere like Peterborough or Cambridgeshire. So don't do yourself down, Jonathan. Well,
you're very kind. You're very kind. Now, Paul, obviously you are newly elected. You're just only in the early stage of getting your feet under the desk. So I was just keen to understand and hear from you. What are your priorities as the mayor? There is an awful lot to do. The country is feeling in a very tumultuous place. Things are looking, I'm sure, very rocky in your constituency and area now as much as it is across the country, whether that be for individuals, whether that be for businesses, and obviously the famous public transport issues and concerns. What is it that you want to focus on? What is it you're going to deliver now as the mayor for the next 4 years?
Well, on day one, Jonathan, I issued 4 what are called mayoral decision notices. And we have to work together when you're mayors. You have to work with the other constituent parts. So it's a board, and they're the leaders of the different councils in your area. But I issued 4 mayoral decision notices, which means these are things that I want to achieve straight away. And so the first thing was to end the target of reducing car journeys across Peterborough and Cambridgeshire by 15%. I think that was really, really important. I sent back the net zero hub, which actually back to government, which doesn't benefit a single person in Cambridgeshire and Peterborough. And I also made it clear that we were going to root out waste and we were going to tax people less. Those are my priorities.
And so what tax powers out of interest do you have, Paul? I suppose with all these mayors, we've now got we have district or borough councils, we have county councils, we're getting lots of discussion about unitary authorities. Now we've got mayors and obviously the idea of more mayors coming in future years. What powers do you actually have as the mayor? What can people lay on your door versus actually what you have to work with when it comes to dealing with government or indeed other local authorities?
Well, just on tax, there is a thing called the mayoral precept. So that's like an additional precept on your council tax. Now, the last mayor, the Labour mayor, promised he'd never introduce one. He did, and then he trebled it. So I've pledged that I'm going to freeze it. What I'd like to do is get rid of it eventually, Jonathan, but I've pledged I'm going to freeze it, and no one will ever pay any more mayoral precept tax in Cambridgeshire than they do right now at the end of my term. I will never increase it. Hopefully, if we can root out waste, we might be able to get rid of it. But at the start, I've just pledged to freeze it. But there are lots of other things that I can do. I want to get Cambridgeshire and Peterborough moving. And so one of the big areas that I've got responsibility for is transport. So that's why we ditched that ludicrous goal of trying to reduce car journeys by 15% by 2030. And instead, we're going to start dualling some of our A roads like the A47 and the A10. We're going to connect our 3 cities by much faster trains. It takes 45 minutes to get from Peterborough to London and a similar time to get from Cambridge to London. But to go from Peterborough to Cambridge by train, it takes 55 minutes. So it's ridiculous. So we're going to try and improve that infrastructure there. And thirdly, we're going to build light rail in Cambridge. But look, my job is to boost and to promote Cambridgeshire and Peterborough, and I will do that at every occasion. I'm the sort of guy, as you know, Jonathan, when we were MPs together, who's always going to be county first, Cambridgeshire first, party second.
Well, I'm pleased to hear that. And actually, I think it's important when we have these opportunities that we do allow people like yourself to outline what you actually do. And while some viewers might think we're being technical nerds here, I think it's actually important to distinguish and understand what it is that you as mayor want to do and therefore allow your voters to be able to hold you accountable. But of course, you are also now one of the most senior Conservative figures in this British political scene. Obviously, you've got Kemi Badenoch, clearly the leader of the Conservative Party, but you now have, I think it's yourself and Ben Houchin are the only 2 elected mayors across the country. So your voice will be very important indeed. I was keen to get your view first of all. Reform UK have come out with a policy that they are going to reverse entirely winter fuel payments and restore them back in full and scrap the 2-child benefit cap. Paul, does this go to prove what many Conservative voices have been saying on social media today? Reform are not a right-wing party, they are a left-wing party, and any Conservative considering voting for Reform should rethink.
Well, what they are is it's clear that the country outside the M25, places like Stoke, Jonathan, are a lot more socially conservative than people who live within the M25. That's always been the case. But when it comes to the economy, the Reform are clearly trying to outflank the Labour Party, and they think by promising to scrap the two-child tax limit that will somehow win them appeals. But actually, that policy was actually quite popular because the people I'm interested in supporting, of course, those who can't work deserve to be supported, but the people I'm interested in supporting are those who are in work, who are actually working, making a difference, doing the things that we all want people to do. So that's the people I want to focus on, not those, unfortunately, for one reason or another, can't work. You know, I don't think it sends a very good message to think that those who have made a decision not to have a third child, for example, because they can't afford it, are basically paying for those who, for one reason or another, have decided to have more children. Look, having children is good. I want people to have children. I want people to have lots of children, but I also want people to pay for them.
Wouldn't the argument be back from Reform and even Labour supporters that ultimately what they're trying to do here is eliminate child poverty? And there's many economists suggesting that 400,000 plus children could be instantly lifted out of poverty by scrapping this two-child benefit cap. So actually this is about a moral case to try and end child poverty and support those families here and now, rather than promising, you know, improvement in infrastructure, whether that be to high-skilled, high-wage jobs, to technical education routes. Isn't this about helping here and now, particularly in this cost of living crisis?
Well, I think the moral thing is to reward those who work, those who are self-reliant, those who want to go out and earn money for their family. We need to look after them and keep their taxes as low as possible. I don't think it's moral necessarily to hike taxes on working people and to give it to, or give even more to those who are not in work. Look, we have to protect people. You know, there has to be a safety net. But it's a safety net, Jonathan. It can't be a lifestyle choice. And that's what we need to do, as far as I'm concerned. I think on welfare, we need to be much more moral when we talk about welfare. It's a good thing, okay, to support those who can't support themselves. But, you know, it comes at a cost. And that cost needs to be kept as low as possible to reward those people who are working, who are contributing, who are paying tax.
And do you support the idea of completely reversing the winter fuel payment cut? Would you like to see, as Reform in the UK is saying, it fully reinstated to all eligible pensioners?
Well, let's just remember why this was introduced in the first place. It was introduced because we've got some of the highest energy costs in the world. It was introduced because we felt it was a good thing to support pensioners who feel the cold more than the rest of us. And it was introduced because it was felt that it was needed. There was a clear need for it. Okay, I think we're in a worse economic situation now than when we were when it was introduced. And we're talking about people earning just over 13,000. This is not a king's ransom. Now, people will go, do you think millionaires deserve it? Clearly not. Okay, but I think people who earn just above 13,000 should have it, and so and perhaps the most cost-effective way of doing it is not to means test at all. But that we have to look at it. We have to look at it in the round and find the most cost-effective way of doing it, so it actually targets those people who need it.
So would you be supportive potentially of what the government is rumoured to be looking at, which is making it eligible to all pensioners, but for those who have to obviously file a tax return, that would be clawed back through that mechanism, meaning that actually the scheme would only raise of technically 200 to 300 million rather than the so-called 1.5 billion that Labour promised. Do you think that would be something that you could get behind as mayor if this government were to introduce it?
Well, I mean, sometimes when you do these, when you apply these means tests, it turns out it costs more to administer the scheme than it would just to give to everybody. So if it costs more, I mean, I'm not ideological about it. I want to save the taxpayer as much money as it can. And if it costs more to administer the scheme, you might as well just give it to everybody.
And Paul, I'm also keen to understand, you talked about obviously the winter fuel being important, like you say, to help those in need. If the government don't make the changes in time that it introduces into this winter, would you be willing to use any of the funding that you've got as mayor to support pensioners across Cambridgeshire and Peterborough for this winter alone to make sure that they don't face the hardship of having to choose between heating and eating?
Yeah, well, we did look into that, to be honest. I looked at that for the election to see if that was something that I could get behind. I didn't commit to doing that because I didn't have all the facts and the figures and the budgets, in front of me. But if there is something I can do, perhaps working with Age UK, great charity, sort of locally in Cambridgeshire and Peterborough, do great many things. If there's something I can do around the edges there to just try and take off that cost on those who are earning just above the pension credit threshold, then I'd be very interested in looking at that.
So we can say this is a commitment from you as Mayor that you're willing to work with, like you say, certain charities or the local authorities to support pensioners for at least this winter, whilst waiting to see what the long-term solution is from the government.
I'm going to sit down with Age UK. I'd want to understand what it would cost. I would want to understand whether I could work with Peterborough City Council, Cambridge City Council and the County Council on a scheme. If we could do some sort of match funding thing, that's something I'm really interested in exploring. But forgive me, before I say yes, I definitely am going to do it, I'd need to have those conversations.
Well, it's still a talk exclusive here, Paul, that from the Mayor that you're willing to work with local authorities and Age UK into supporting pensions, and might well be a lightning rod for other mayors to copy and follow. Now, one of the other things that's come up regularly, I'm sure on your doorsteps, is the asylum hotels. The fact that in communities across Peterborough and Cambridgeshire, hotels are being used to house illegal migrants, which we know is up 37% in 2025 as it was on 2024. 13,500 have now crossed the English Channel, and we're not even in the peak season. Paul, Zia Youssef put out a claim that Reform UK-led councils were going to take legal action against the Home Office in order to force them to empty hotels and stop dumping people in those communities. Is that something you too are considering doing for your community?
Well, I would certainly support Peterborough City Council and any other council across Cambridgeshire who had a migrant hotel or hostel in their area. I'd certainly support that 100%. I even had a conversation with the Labour leadership of Peterborough City Council and challenged them very specifically on this point. So let's see what they come back with. But we've got the Dragonfly Hotel in Peterborough, which is by a boating lake. Jonathan, you won't know it, but it's a very beautiful part of the city. And 146 single men are now staying in that hotel. And that puts things like the Dragon Boat Festival, which lots of people will enjoy at risk. I hope that can go ahead. But what I've done is I've set out a public letter to our 2 Labour MPs for Peterborough and asked them if they will work with me in trying to get that hotel stood down. I got the Great Northern Hotel, which was once the flagship hotel for Peterborough, stood down when I was the local MP. There were things we did, there were tricks we did, there were cases we made. We worked with, believe it or not, refugee charities in Peterborough to say that they had had too many already coming through their system, so we got a whole collection of people supporting us because there's not the resources to support those charities. And we succeeded, and we got the Great Northern Hotel stood down. But as of yet, the 2 Labour MPs have not said they want to work with me, instead sent me a snotty response back. I don't think that's good enough, and I'll keep challenging them until they sit down with me and work with me. Because look, I'm not going anywhere. They're not going anywhere for a number of years. We have to learn to work together.
Well, out of interest, Paul, we've seen that news is breaking about the idea that the Labour government are looking to try and do deals with countries like Kosovo and other Balkan nations to create these return hubs, something similar to what Italy's done with Albania, which has actually seen a reduction in illegal migrant crossings into Italy. Are you convinced this is a good idea? Is this just Rwanda 2.0, or is this some... do you think Labour's talking tough ultimately are going to come a crop to the same issues, challenges on the Human Rights Act grounds, as well as the European Court of Human Rights interfering?
You remember what we were called by Labour MPs when we were supporting Rwanda and we wanted, a similar tough approach. Do you remember that?
Yes.
It's hypocrisy in the extreme. Now, look, I know that it's slightly different in the sense they're talking only about those who've failed their asylum applications being returned to these hubs. But that principle of using an offshore deterrent, it's the same thing, isn't it, Jonathan? But for 1 minute, when you and I were talking about it, when the government was talking about it, and we were pushing Rwanda, we were called all sorts of outrageous names. But for them, suddenly it seems okay. Ridiculous.
And then finally from me, Paul, obviously you won't be missing the fact that the polls are showing the Conservative Party's going through a pretty rough time. Lots of polls saying the Conservatives are now in between 17 and 19%, some having us at 20-21%. There's been a lot of criticism in the papers recently about Kemi Badenoch, about whether or not she should continue as a leader. Do you think Kemi is right to be leader of the Conservative Party, or do you think there needs to be a realisation that perhaps she's just simply not up to the job?
Now, Kemi, I'm going to support 100%. We're recovering from the worst ever election performance the Conservative Party ever had in 2024, and it's going to take more than 6 months to turn that around. You know, we let people down in those kind of last 2 years. What happened in 2022, Jonathan? You'll remember this. What happened? The Conservative Party obviously got rid of Boris Johnson, and we abandoned what I would call the realignment. I know there was that interregnum with Liz Truss, less said about that, but there was that interregnum. But what we did is we abandoned that realignment and we went back to a technocratic managerial approach. And that was rejected overwhelmingly by the electorate. Now, in Keir Starmer and the Labour Party, we've got the same approach, but even worse. You know, that's technocratic and managerial approach where you can't seem to say anything or stick to anything. And the hypocrisy is just absurd. Now, look, what have Reform done? Okay, Reform do angry. Okay, they are understandably lots of people who are angry about this, and Reform are trying to attract those people. What we've got to do as Conservatives is remember the lessons of the 2019 election and offer hope and optimism. Because if you remember, that election wasn't just about Brexit, it wasn't just about stopping Jeremy Corbyn, it was also about levelling up, it was also about 40 new hospitals, it was also about the things that we can do in the public sector to offer people hope. That's what we need to do again.
Well, Paul, you talk about the 2019 election, and you did mention his name earlier on in your answer, a certain Boris Johnson. You were, and I've always been, a big ally of Boris. Don't you think Boris coming off the play, or coming out of the farmers' fields that he resigned himself to, would be good? Don't you think Boris Johnson's the only person who could get any cut through against Keir Starmer, who's got the trappings of the office of the Prime Minister to help him, and Nigel Farage, who is a big political beast and a big personality too? Is it not time for Boris to come out of retirement and save the Conservative Party?
Well, I'd love to see Boris back in frontline politics. And as you remember, I was in the bunker till the end with Boris. You know, I thought it was a huge mistake to get rid of him in 2022 for all the reasons I've just outlined around the realignment and the approach and the people we were trying to attract and the coalition that he built. We seem to have got rid of Prime Minister, leader after leader. That's the problem. You know, we've got Kemi. She's been leader just 6 months, or just a handful of months after the worst ever performance the Conservative Party has ever known. I support her 100%. She's got those right instincts, I think, about what she wants to do. And the worst thing we could do is start changing our leader again.
And when you say Boris into frontline politics, what do you mean, Paul? Would you like to see him back in Parliament? Do you think he belongs on those green benches once again?
Plenty of marginal seats for him in Cambridgeshire to have a go at.
Well, here we go. There's an open offer to Boris Johnson. Mayor Paul Bristow, the Mayor of Cambridgeshire and Peterborough, thank you so much for joining us today.